Here to discuss the current beef price situation are Eddie Punch, the General Secretary of the Irish Cattle Sheep Farmers Association, and Michael Lynch, the CEO of Kilkenny Mart. Eddie, can you outline the current price situation at the moment, and can you explain why it's so low?
Yeah, what's been going on now for the last few weeks is a concerted effort to drive down price paid to farmers for beef. So at the moment we're looking at around $3.70 a kilo for base price. Last week it was $3.75, and it's been coming down 5 cents a week for the last number of weeks. So there's a very clear orchestrated effort to drive down the price, and farmers are at their wits' end. And I think we in ICSA are shocked at the absolute ruthlessness in the year we've just had, at a time when farmers have been through the longest winter in years, snow in March, drought in June and July, huge additional cost, under huge stress and pressure, and yet price has been driven down at a time when the demand situation in supermarkets and retail outlets across the UK and Europe is quite good. And I think what's happening here is they want to get the price down lower, so that when beef gets scarcer later in the year, it has a long way to come back up to a reasonable price. And you look at the Newford farm, which only this week has admitted that suckler beef needs €5 a kilo to break even, and we're talking about $3.70 a kilo for prime beef. It is scandalous in our view, and we wonder what kind of people would do this in a year when farmers are on their knees. We see, at least in the dairy and the grain sectors, there's some compensation, if you like, in the sense that grain price is up higher after a very difficult year in scarcity. We see dairy co-ops trying to support their farmers a little bit, but the beef farmer and the sheep farmer are left totally out in a limb by the meat industry. And I'd really ask, what kind of people would try to profiteer on farmers in a year like this?
Eddie, how fearful are you and your members that it actually might drop even further?
Look, people are in a very bad position. Right now, people are scrambling to get enough fodder together for the winter. They don't want a repeat of last year, but they're so far behind. We still have roughly a 10 or 11% deficit in fodder. It's higher in parts. So people are doing their very best to have enough fodder, but also, of course, they don't want to have too much stock this winter. So they're weak sellers at the moment. They're in a very vulnerable position. And the options are limited for those farmers. Now, one of the things that really strikes me is the way in which the differential between Irish beef price and UK beef price has widened this year. The start of the year it was around 25 cents. It's gone to about 50 cents now. So just at the point when they're driving down Irish beef prices, UK beef prices are steady to improving. So the differential now on that 360 kilo steer is now €180, and there is no justification for that. It really, begs the question, why would we, as farmers, subscribe to the strategy to expand Irish meat exports, the whole food-wise strategy to expand, run faster to stand still, at a time when the meat industry has shown it has complete indifference? It is reprehensible what they're doing. Reprehensible. What kind of people, in a year when farmers are on their knees, when we get stories of people who are under stress, who are under pressure, would actually say, let's make even more profit this year? That's scandalous.
Michael, can I just bring you in on the impact of the fodder shortage and how is it impacting on store trade at the moment?
Yes, Claire, well, I suppose the simplest way of putting it is that it's very challenging at the moment, the trading situation for farmers. And obviously a good bit is exacerbated, as Eddie says, when the prices are coming down in the factory. That has a knock-on effect on the Mart situation. But feeding into that situation is the fodder situation, and that has having a major effect on it this year. It's distorted things, because as Eddie said, this is going on since this time last year. You've had a long and expensive winter, followed when all stocks were depleted, followed by a long drought during the summer when they weren't replenished. So people now have to make decisions. And what you're seeing is you have a catch-22. You've got some people that want cattle to sell earlier than they normally would because they see a problem going forward. On the other hand, you have the buyers who would normally, they have the same situation with a shortage of feed. And it's resulting in one or two things. I suppose the buyers are saying, I have enough feed to last me till X amount of time. I won't purchase any stock until later than I normally do. Or you have some of them saying, I'm not going to purchase anything this year. I'm getting a good price for the feed to sell, and they're doing that. Now, how much that is going to happen in the longer term, I don't know. But it is having a major effect. And what you see is probably the heavier stock, factory fit stock, are stable. Not as good as last year, but they're stable. There is an interest in those. It's the cattle that are, say, 350 to 450 kilos, longer term cattle. People are scared. They can't look that much forward. The fodder is feeding into that, and they are a very challenging situation for those at the moment.
What about the competition ringside as well? I suppose you were expecting the exporters to have a much bigger presence, but on the back of the Turkish situation, the lira situation, how would you describe competition ringside?
Yeah, it's I mean, there isn't competition there at the moment. Those situations have meant that exporters are not really that active at the moment, and particularly in the West, where the weaning sales are probably more prominent at this stage. It's more farmers that are buying than exporters at this stage, and that is not a help to the price as well. For the really good stock, there is a certain market for those, but with the Turkish situation, and even Spain and Italy are not that enthusiastic at the moment. That is a challenge at the moment, and certainly it wouldn't really have kicked off to any level compared to what other years at this point in time.
Michael, do you think the factories are solely to blame for the price decline?
Well, I suppose it all comes down to supply and demand, and where you have a greater supply than demand is there, well, somebody's going to benefit from that, and it's not going to help prices. And I suppose the factories for the last number of months, they have by default got a lot of stock produced to them because of the further situation, and that's not helping. And I suppose they're taking that opportunity, they're dropping the prices, and that is having a severe knock-on effect to our side, the market trading side of things.
Eddie, are you engaging with the factories on this? Are you talking to them?
Yeah, we have the beef roundtable coming up next week, but look, there's a number of problems here that are feeding into this. One is the way in which the factories have got into the business of feedlots. And I think this really has to be looked at, whether it's appropriate or right that factories who are involved in processing should also be in the feedlot business, because they've been using feedlots to keep a control on beef prices as well, at times of the year when maybe supply gets a little bit scarce. And at the same time now they're using the beef price to interfere in ways with the store trade, because they're sending very strong signals out which is deterring people from buying stores, so that their own feedlots can then buy stores at a little less than they might otherwise do. So we have to have a look at what's going on here. I think also we have to look at, Commissioner Hogan has been doing work on the unfair trading practices in the food chain, but I think we have to go a lot further. As Michael said, supply and demand is central, but there's, every year we see that, the food chain is returning better margins to everybody else along the food chain and squeezing the margins there for farmers all the time. And we have to have a look at this, and we need to have more transparency around who exactly is getting what. I think, look, supermarkets have to look at themselves as well and say, are they happy? And we saw there last week where Pat McDonough of Supermax said that he'd be happy to pay a little bit more for beef, but only if it went direct to the farmer. And fair play to him for that. But I think supermarkets too, who like to boast about how they use Irish beef, need also to ask themselves, are they happy if they're using Irish beef off the back of producers who are going under? That's a real question we have to look at as well. So I think we need more transparency in who's getting what out of the food chain. I think we need to look at this question of whether it's appropriate that processors should also be finishing cattle in their own feedlots. And I think we need to ask hard questions of supermarkets who like to tell the consumer that they're supporting Irish farmers. But is it really sustainable the way you're supporting Irish farmers if you expect them to work for nothing? So we have to look at all of these questions.
Michael, we saw in the VT there just how challenging and difficult the situation is on the ground for beef producers. How would you describe confidence ringside looking ahead for the future of the sector? Because this is only one element of it. 6 months' time, we've Brexit.
I'd say confidence at the moment is very low for some of the factors we've already discussed, and uncertainty always creates a low confidence factor, and things like Brexit and where that's going to go makes people very, very cautious, and that affects the Mart trade in, particularly for the cattle that they might be purchasing for 12 months' time. When you're looking that far ahead and you see all the uncertainties there, that is having a major effect around the ring at this stage. Farmers are optimistic. If they get a little bit of confidence, that helps. They need confidence from the factory side to increase the price, to give them a feeling that there's worth investing in buying, purchasing cattle again. And I know even in the last week on the fodder situation, as I came up the road today, you see lots of people at silage. Reports are that's better than anticipated. So things like that help. A little bit of confidence helps a lot. But look, certainly farmers at this stage, the confidence would be challenged at this stage to them.
Well, we'll be watching the situation very closely over the coming weeks. Thank you both very much for being here.